Idle here. Today I'm going to talk about the Springball baby skip. I'm not going to call this a tutorial. One, because that implies I know everything about the trick. I don't believe that's true. And the other reason is that to make this a good tutorial, I'd probably need like a dozen different clips of different skips and what went right or wrong with each one. And yeah, that was a lot of work. I decided to make a couple clips, and I'll probably do a bunch of attempts near the end to try to show off different things that can happen. But mainly, I'm going to talk about what I know about the trick. So, for starters, what is the trick? Um, let's play it here, play the video here, and then I'm going to start kind of slowing it down a little bit because there's a lot that happens at once. You do a jump. This is actually on the earlier. So for starters, this exact skip, this is not necessarily the best one to go for. In fact, this is kind of an early jump. This is on the earlier side of a jump. So I'll talk more about the details of that later. Right now, I just want to cover what the trick is. So we do a full jump here, then we do a second space jump under that skree, or you can bonk the bottom of the skree. That works too. We do a shot because we got to break the webbing. Then we aim down. We do a mini mock ball, roll for just a bit, spring ball up through, bounce off this. Actually, funnily enough, I thought I bounced off this when I recorded it. You can actually see I let go of jump right before I bonked it. So this thing didn't actually uh, disintegrate. That's actually optimal to do it this way. This is optimal to not bounce off this, but I would recommend bouncing off of it normally. We'll talk more about that later, and then carrying through. And the real thing that makes this trick go is when we do this roll on the ground for a little bit and jump up. It's the swing action we get on the baby metro here. Let's see it swing around. See how it swings way to the right of the screen. Usually, you need that. Usually, if you want the trick to work, you need that. Now it's fun. As I was making a recording, this is my second attempt at this. The first example I used as I went to get to here, it actually didn't have a very pronounced swing of the baby, but it still worked. So it's not. This trick is so kind of funky. It's at times. It doesn't always like if you do it right, it will work consistently. But there are a lot of ways that it can work even when you don't do it quite right, in addition to all the ways it can fail. That's what makes it kind of tricky to learn because you can kind of fall into bad habits learning it. So I just want to talk through some things I've learned about it. Um, but I really do feel like it's to make this trick go, you need the baby. You need the baby to not lock onto you early. So you need to get it in this position or a similar position. And then you need it to do this wide swing. And there's a little bit of timing to that. Like you need to get to this spot on the ground at kind of the right and have the baby in the certain spot at the right time. And that's actually one of the reasons we roll on the ground a little bit is to give the baby more time to get in the right position. So if you get there a little earlier or a little bit later, it can still work because you do that little roll on the ground. That's why we do that. Okay, so let's get to started on. So with that in mind, timing's important. The very first part of the trick, when we start running, that's important. Now, you may find, I'm going to go over what I go for. You may find that what you do works a little bit differently just based on how you do all those other steps when you do your second jump, when you fire a shot, name down. All those things can contribute a little bit to the trick. And so you may find that you want to start just a couple of ticks later than I am, or maybe you have a couple ticks earlier as well. Although probably not too early. So we're going to shoot this. At some point, you kill out this chorizo here, and then as soon as the baby, we usually go off of when the baby's claws retract like that. So let's see here. Okay, it happened on that frame. One. So it looks like I ran just one frame later. I would say it's usually for me more like 2 to 3 frames later, or maybe 4 to 5 frames. This is kind of pushing it. I'm kind of in fact, maybe that's why the later jump helped me. That might have actually been. I mentioned earlier that earlier jump. See, that jump was a little early. That might have actually been why it worked. Is because this was kind of an early start. I would actually start just a tick later than that. So on the one hand, the claws are the best cue. On the other hand, obviously, if we're starting just like 2 or 3 frames after they close, it's not enough time for you to wait and see them close before you start running. So you need to anticipate it, but you don't want to over anticipate it. You want to anticipate to the point where you're actually running when the claws retract, or definitely not before they retract, because I mean, I guess it could work for you depending on how you do the trick, but it gets tough. It gets tough to make it work. What can happen here? Let's play this forward a little bit. Oh yeah, yeah. I hadn't noticed that earlier. See how far left I am? This is unusually far left for me. So I had another example. Maybe I'll pull back to the other example at this point. We jumped here, yeah. Let's see when I started running for this one. Okay. 1, 2. So this was 2 frames. Watch the difference this makes. Later jump too. Okay, that's actually a little bit closer to the edge as well. But this is not too close. This feels a little better. So I probably should have gone for more like 3 or 4 frames later. But this one, like already, this spacing right here. If I'm looking at this live, I'm thinking that this is a good start. This spacing here. Whereas that other one, it looked like it was pretty close to the wall. Um, the next thing we need to talk about is when you jump. Now, I actually have horizontal speed. I'm tracking horizontal speed here because that's kind of important. The longer that you are running before you jump, the more speed you're going to have. So this is a 3E jump. The last one we looked at was a 3D jump. I normally have trouble with 3D jumps. Probably worked that time because I started a bit earlier. The fastest you can get, I should say, is 3F. So I could have actually run 1 frame longer on the ground and then jumped. I do typically find the faster you go, the better the trick works, the more likely it is to succeed. Although there are some downsides with having the max speed, the 3F jump. And interestingly enough, I've seen Zenny recommend doing that arm pump. Zenny will recommend doing one arm pump as he's running along the ground here. By doing that arm pump, he can no longer get a 3F jump. So he is just he's just doesn't want the 3F jump. He's like, I'll take a 3E or a 3D jump. Um, and if you can make that work consistently, I mean, there are some advantages to it. So I would personally go for the 3E or 3F jump. Um, but you might find something that works better for you. I will say that it is difficult to find a consistent setup that works for 3D and for 3 different speeds. So 3D, 3E, 3F. I normally have trouble making 3D work, and I do wonder if it worked that time because I had that earlier start. And if I were to have started that early, so if we go back to this one, is it? I got to go up here. Yeah. If I had a 3F speed and I was this close to the wall, this probably is not going to work for me. So I don't think that it's even if it's technically possible to find a setup that works for 3 different speeds, it's going to be so close to the margins that both your 3D and 3F jumps are going to be really close to failing all the time, where you don't really want to live there. You want to be on 2 different speeds. So whether it's you do the arm pump and then you're going for 3E or 3D jumps, or maybe you don't do the arm pump, but you're going for 3E or 3F jumps. So kind of like the last 2 frames you can jump, that's probably where you want to go for this trick. So the next part of it is where you do the space jump. And we got to talk about this skree here. This skree is so darn annoying because you kind of want to do an earlier space jump. So this was a pretty well timed space jump, I would say. You could maybe go one frame earlier. Pretty well timed here. It looks like I might have bonked underneath the skree if I hit it. I actually managed to just go under it, so this is almost perfect here for what you want. But I do struggle with this. I do tend to bonk the skree a lot, and the problem is if you jump even a bit earlier, and then instead of bonking the bottom of the skree, you're going to bonk the side of the skree, and that's going to cause you to stop your momentum immediately. In fact, I want to say, if I go back to this example here, so that was the good one that worked. I might have mixed up my videos. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. That's oops. This is gonna be the bonk. Yeah. So that was a good. I would say that's a good time to do the space jump. The maybe you could go a frame later, but I bonked the stupid side of the screen because my jump's too high. Probably should be a frame later. Um, the the problem with going like say 5 frames later, where you're going to be very safely under the screen, is if you bonk the left side of the screen, the bottom and left side of the screen, the baby's just not fooled. It doesn't get in the right spot. You don't get the same swing action. You're just, we got to if we let the trick play out here. We got to let the baby come. We got to get down to the ground and roll. And if the later we're doing the space jump, the longer it's going to take us to get down to the bottom and roll. And it's just the baby's just not in the right spot. So you typically want for a full first jump, you want a somewhat early space jump where it's either in that sweet spot where you can bonk the bottom right side of the screen. So like this bonk would have probably been fine. If I had bonked the screen here, that probably would have been okay. That would have been good. So you either want that or you don't want to bonk the screen at all. If you don't bonk the screen at all, you do have less lag, so that is optimal. But sometimes people are just used to the lag there, so there's that too. Oh, something I forgot to mention at the very beginning. Certainly, you could use if you'll see people do like fancy bomb jumps at the beginning, or they're just doing that to try to time that first jump. You might be able to find techniques like that to time that first jump. Sorry, I totally forgot to mention that, but I don't have anything like that. I'm mainly just trying to anticipate, but not over anticipate the clause. So you do the space jump, and then after the space jump, you wait a little bit, and then you fire the shot. You can wait longer than this. I know Zenny talks about how a later shot really helped him. And that again comes back to the tuning. Personally, I haven't found whether the shot is a little earlier or a little later to make a significant difference. But Zenny is correct that, look what's happening to our speed. So as soon as we broke spin, we dropped speed. See how it went from 3D to 3B? So you're moving a little bit slower. So that's going to have an impact. If you're doing your shot later, then you're going to have a little bit more speed for longer. If when you do this aim down, that's also changing your pose and your hitbox, and it manipulates the baby's movement a little bit too. So these things do make a difference, but you might also find just starting a tick earlier or a tick later at the very beginning makes the same difference. You might be able to make up the difference there. Now the timing of the shot does matter when as far as breaking the webbing. So first off, if the shot is too high, you can actually hit that dust topper off there that we usually bounce off of. You don't have to. I believe this is the example where I didn't bounce off of it. You don't have to bounce off of it, but usually you do. And then if your shot is too low, sometimes you don't break all the webbing. So sometimes like the webbing, if your shot was a little bit too low, this webbing might still be here in the top corner, and you might bonk it here. So we roll a little bit, bounce up. Usually you're going to bounce off this thing. And you might even be wondering, why would I even risk not bouncing off it? Look at this. Like, this one is pretty good. I still cleared this webbing by a little bit here. But imagine if I had cut my jump too short. I could have bounced off this webbing. If you touch this webbing at all here, it's over. You're not going to make it. So why on earth would I have even risked that? Let's look what happens. We go to the door. We get to the other side. We have a 57 door. See that this so the top right here, you've got 2008 for the room time, 4 frames to lag, 57 door. Now let's look at the attempt I was going to use as my example. Yeah, here, this one. So there we bonk the skree. This is way more common. Looks like my shot was a little bit lower too, and you can see. So a lower shot, if you're gonna go for not bonking this hopper, you probably want a little bit lower shot. Let's see how that looked. Might as well watch this one all the way through actually. So good space jump there. A little bit light on the jump. This probably barely worked as far as the jump. So let's see how many frames this was. 1, 2, 2 frames. I honestly didn't know a 2-frame jump worked. I don't know if that always works. It probably does. If you have a 1-frame jump, it will not work. The baby's just not fooled. You just don't jump enough. This jump is kind of small. I would not be surprised if that jump sometimes fails. The shot comes up just a little bit later. Otherwise, looks pretty similar. We bonk this guy. And then we're going to go to the door. And all of a sudden, we have a 59 door. And that is because I bonked that hopper. Now, sometimes, in fact, more than half the time, you bonk that hopper, nothing bad happens to you, you get the 57 door. Occasionally, you'll get scammed with lag, you get a 59. The worst case is 63. Now, a 60, and the problem with the 63 door is the way that these frames are. It's not. Let's see where this. Yeah, okay. These extra frames are happening right here. It's because this guy's playing some really hard to hear sound. He's playing some like fuzz, white noise sound as he's crumbling, and it's because we're waiting for the sound to clear. It's giving this baby free movement. So those 2 frames of movement right there, it just got 2 free frames of movement, and now it's going to start moving during the fade out. We can see it move slower during the fade out. And it's not going to get there. And it actually looks like this one probably would have worked even if I'd gotten a 63 door. So a 63 door could still work. And that's why just bonking that hopper is not the worst thing to do. But there is a chance, and I've had runs where this has happened, where I have a good skip, but I get a terrible door, and the baby catches me. So optimally, you would go like this one here, where it doesn't even look like I bonked it. This one's perfect, but you probably want to pair it with a later shot so you clear more of this webbing out if you're going to do that. The only other caveat with this, I would say, is if you do avoid the skree, sometimes the combination of avoiding the skree, like being low here, and also not bonking that hopper, makes it a little bit easier for the baby to catch you. So even though you get a good door, I have seen the baby catch Samus, like track Samus better. Because this one was so good, we didn't really see any difference. This one's, you can't even tell the difference where Samus' height is. But if Samus were a little bit lower here, it would allow the baby to track a little better. I have found that whenever I bonk the skree, I'm good. Like the baby tracks a little better, but it's just not good enough. You still make it to the door. But if you both don't bonk the skree and don't bonk this hopper, sometimes the baby just tracks Samus so well that you are able to you can get caught. So there's some risk to it as well. In addition to just jumping so low that you bonk the webbing, there's always that risk. Okay, what other parts of the trick can we talk about? So that's the main gist of it. There are a couple of exceptions, you could say, that you can do. You may have seen people. I've been talking like this this action, getting this swing action out of this Metroid, is important, and that you need to roll on the ground for that. But you may have seen people do a spring ball bounce off of and get that to work. And it's absolutely possible to do that. The main problem with that spring ball bounce is because you need the baby to be at a certain spot at the right, you need the timing to be right. When we go back to this beginning, you need you need this to be consistent. So probably you'd want to go for a 3F jump here. You wouldn't want to go for a 3D. You'd want to jump at the if it's gonna be frame perfect, you might as well jump on the very last frame and get the um, full speed. I might try to do some demonstrations of that. I probably should have recorded that. I actually do have some recordings of it I could go find. Maybe I'll do that. Kind of going on the fly here because I was on a roll here for the stretch. Of course, I find the stretch where I'm not on a roll. Yeah, I also went through a stretch where I was failing it a lot, so I think I found the stretch where I'm failing a lot. Let me back it up a little bit. There's one. Okay, so let's watch this one again. So where do the claws crawls? 2 frames again. So even with 3F jump, interesting, made 2 frames work. You can see how late that is. See how close to the edge I am. So I was concerned that that's too close to the edge. It doesn't seem like it actually is. But I do think at least 2 frames after the claw closes for a 3F jump. Because we're going for this method, that was actually an earlier space jump. I could have even space jumped later than that and had this work. Now we're going to shoot and immediately get down into a morph ball. Actually, that was kind of late. I'm surprised this worked. Sometimes if you get into morph too late, like you just won't bounce. Like, that is incredibly late, I would say, to be able to make that work. But you can see, like, even though the baby was not there very long, this is another one of those examples where it wasn't a very wide whip of baby, but it still worked. But the timing's just got to be right for this. The nice thing about this skip. Oh, and one other downside I should mention. Um, because this is a spring ball bounce, this bounce is always a full bounce. So you have to bounce in this hopper. You have to just live with potentially getting a bad door. Although because we are going so fast, we have the most speed. These skips do tend to work better. I wonder if another example will show it better. Let's let this play out. I was on a bit of a roll here when I was recording this. Oh, this is when I figured out I didn't have sound. I didn't have sound set up, even though I'm not playing the sound right now. I fixed my sound. And then I went right back to hitting it. So that's another good one. I wanted to. So I think this one had a better, like, if you're gonna go for this, even that was kind of middle. Sometimes you're so late here that if you actually were to roll on the ground, you don't have enough. You don't almost don't have enough room This one looked like there would have been enough room though. But sometimes your second space jump can be so late that you wouldn't be able to do a mock ball roll on this. But because you're going for the bounce method, you can get it to work. You see, I sometimes shoot too early when I'm going for this because you need to get in a bounce. You need to get in the mock ball early. That would look a little better. If I shot any higher, pretty much, I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna hit this hopper, and the trick's not gonna work. You see how high this was? It was kind of crazy high. You can actually, if you're not paying attention, if you keep holding jump here, you can actually land and bounce because we have so much speed. We actually, you or no, that doesn't happen because you have so much speed. I think it's because we didn't roll on the ground. That's why it happens. But just anytime you land here, you got to make sure you let go of jump at some point so you don't bounce up. If you bounce like to the middle of the door transition, the baby will probably catch you. It's very likely. Let's see some more attempts. There was a 57 door, even though I hit the hopper. Yeah, with that 3F jump, you could see that baby kind of swung weird, but it still worked. It's actually somewhat common with the 3F jump that you have so much speed. Oh, there, I finally missed it. I hadn't missed one in a little while. I'm going to start missing a whole bunch. I got to go back up. That one, that's an interesting one. Because let's see how late I started this one. One, two, three. Oh, it was three. It was only three. It seems like I started late. That's not good. Wow, the baby almost caught me there. The baby is definitely catching you if that's a bad door for that one. When you start running is pretty important. It's not frame perfect. I'm not convinced it's frame perfect, but it does have a significant impact. You kind of need to lock that in. Wonder if I can go back further and find some more good attempts. Oh yeah, that one. Let's see what happened with this one. Let's see if we can diagnose this one. What went wrong with this one? Did I start at the wrong time? This is why I'm not calling this a tutorial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh geez, yeah. 6. Too late. Because this jump's good too. But the baby's, and this is good. This is all good. But the baby's just in the wrong spot. I didn't start running at the right time. And now it tracks you. Boom. It gets us. There's another one. I bet I was too early that one too. And there. That one's good. Let's see what this one was. This good one. One, two, three. Is that lag? Okay, one, or sorry, that's when it closed. 1, 2. Yeah, there's a lag frame. 3, 4, 5. So starting 5 frames late, good. And with lag too. So if I hadn't gotten a lag frame, this probably would not have worked. So maybe a 4-frame window on when you can start running. You don't want to be relying on that lag frame. The game does. That's kind of a rare. That might even be an OB. That might even be a I recorded it. Like I'm not recording it exactly the correct refresh rate. That might even be a recording lag frame. But I would believe a 4-frame window for when you start running. That sounds about right. Again, don't know if that's 100% or if it depends on the exact setup you're going for. But it does, I mean, you do want that to be somewhat consistent. Not to the frame, but definitely consistent. And the only thing I want to talk about is, let's see, is what if we don't do a full jump? Is this the one where I don't do a full jump? Yeah, so I thought this one was kind of interesting. This is something I've been experimenting with. You don't actually need a full jump here. So we got another 3F jump. So in this case, I'm going for more of a traditional setup. So I could have done a full jump, but I chose not to. I chose to cut off my jump. This is a good place, I would say. Of course, the risk here is if you cut off your jump later, that's fine. If you jumped higher, that wouldn't make much of a difference. But if you don't get enough height, if you were to jump too low before you release your jump, the baby's just not going to fool. The baby's just going to go kind of in a straight line and go get you. So we're going to fall down here. Let's see how big this jump is. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So I think that this is a pretty typical jump for me, a 3-frame jump, and oftentimes that's enough to bonk the side of the screen. But because I was low, I was able to execute the 3-frame jump and not bonk the side of the screen. So that's kind of what I'm going for with this. Because you need at least a 2-frame jump, but you also, and if you bonk the bottom of the screen, you can have as many frames as you want. With a 3F jump, I could probably afford to bonk the middle of the screen. With a 3E jump, though, if I were to bonk the middle of the screen, that'd be pretty. I'd be right on the line as whether the trick works or not. If you have too late of a space jump with a 3E running start, it just doesn't seem to work for me consistently at all. And here we're going to go for our roll, and then this is all the same. There, I cut this one off early, but that one's pretty good still. These look scarier. You can kind of sell on this one. Maybe we'll play it at full speed. It kind of looks like the baby's going to get you. But because I didn't bonk that hopper up here, the dust hopper, I'm always going to get this good 57 door. That baby's never going to catch you. They look scarier, but you are okay. And this is an example of not bonking this. Like, I wasn't even that close to the screen on this one, I don't think. Let's see. Yeah, this is not that close to the screen and not that close to the hopper. So it can work. But if I were to do, let's see how much I cleared this webbing by. Ooh, that's pretty close. You can see here, like, oof. I guess I wouldn't have been able to go too much lower. So it is kind of a risk. I've just been burned by this lag enough times that I kind of want to go for it. Although, I don't know. It's tough when you're on pace to go for it. It's easier to just be like, okay, I'm not going to get screwed that many times. Just go for bonking the hopper. So yeah, that is my whole spiel. I was gonna do some attempts at the end. But I think I kind of covered everything I want to cover, so maybe I won't do that. I guess I ended up playing video of me doing attempts back to back to back. Yeah, that's all I know about this skip. Not sure if that was that helpful or not, but I'll put the video up. Probably not going to advertise it too much. It'll just be around. Thanks for watching.